Hey, good morning. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm excited to spend the next hour with you. I was just asked a question right before I came on from someone who's doing a blog post or a YouTube video about if I could have a friend bring me 5 games. If I moved to another country, left all my games behind, and I could have a friend bring me 5 Stonemaier games, which 5 games would I ask them to bring? It's a tough question. We have around 20 games now. I love them all. And so I'm trying to view these from a lens of like variety and how I can play these games with different people, different types of people, different player counts, things like that. But yeah, it was a fun question. I'm thinking about this right now. Let me know your answer if you have an answer to that. If you moved to another country, couldn't bring any of your games, and at some point, or maybe you can bring 5 games, 5 Stonemaier games. Which 5 would you bring? And the question actually added a little twist. They said, okay, what if you arrive at that country with those 5 games, and upon arrival, they say, actually, you can only bring one of these in. Which of those games would you decide to actually bring in? I have other questions today for you, but let's start off with that one. Yeah, it's been a really nice weather week here in St. Louis so far. Not too hot, not too cold. We had a beautiful disc golf day the other day. And I'm looking forward to going to the farmer's market in Tower Grove this week. What is going on here? So Stonemaier Games, I've been doing, despite the nice weather, I've been spending a lot of inside time working on things like proofreading for the Tokaido expansions, doing some play testing, a little bit of design work. We have a couple products in blind play testing right now. And next week, we have our Tokaido reveal. So Tokaido is an existing game. It's been around for a while. It's a modern classic. We acquired the brand last year, and we are making our own version of it. That same gameplay, same art, but we're adding kind of little accessibility and quality of life improvements to it. And I've talked about them here and there, but I haven't put them all in one place and shown photos of it. And that reveal will happen next Wednesday. It'll be a newsletter livecast next Wednesday. And then 2 weeks later, as long as shipping continues to go well, 2 weeks later will be the launch of our version of Tokaido, along with a Tokaido promo realm for Rolling Realms, a Tokaido disc golf disc, Tokaido metal coins, all sorts of Tokaido stuff. Later in the year, we're hoping to have Tokaido Duo and the Tokaido expansions available as well, the Stonemaier versions of them. All of this is completely compatible with the original version of Tokaido, including the new solo mode that Automa Factory created for the game. So yeah, some of you are mentioning that daylight savings time happened, at least in the US, it happened this past weekend. So it might be earlier or later for you than usual. It's actually, I always forget which one is better for people with pets, because it's nice to gain an hour in the fall when we fall back. Springing forward confuses my human body. I've been sleeping in a little bit later, but it's good for pets because Walter is letting me sleep in a little bit, which is nice. He rarely lets me do that. He usually wakes me up at 7 o'clock on the dot. Walter's my cat, our cat. So that's been a little nice to do. Carlos says, was there a March newsletter? I didn't receive one last week, and the progress chart hasn't been updated since January 28th. So Carlos, let's see when the last news. We've had a little bit of an odd newsletter schedule, including the fact that we're doing our newsletter this coming week. When was the last one? Let's see. I'll look at the website on my other screen here to see when it was. We had a newsletter. So if you go to news on the Stonemaier Games website, it looks like there was a February newsletter, Carlos, and I must have either I didn't update the date on the progress chart. Yeah, I think this is correct. Yeah. The last newsletter was on February 5th. There has not been a March newsletter yet, because I've been waiting to get a little bit closer to the Tokaido launch to do that newsletter. I've been trying to, whenever we reveal a new product, I've been trying to have a fairly tight gap between that reveal and when we actually start selling that product. And so that's why there's a short gap. Probably usually won't be 2 weeks like we're doing with Tokaido, but that's what we're doing here. I see some answers to my question about what 5 games or what one Stonemaier game would you bring into the country. Let's see. A question here. Scythe is the one. Could you make the other games if you knew the rules with pieces from Scythe? Could you play other games with the pieces from Scythe? I think that could apply to multiple games. Like you could probably choose a game if you could truly only bring one game to another country, to an island or something like that. You could probably find creative ways to use those pieces to maybe not play other games, but to maybe even design new games using the components that you have on hand. Mark says, have you ever considered making a different theme for viticulture? My wife was wondering if making viticulture into a wooden ship management style game would be pretty interesting. I've heard of different themes applied to viticulture, including one, a fan recently designed a version of viticulture just for fun that for their kids that uses potion making, I believe it was, or potion brewing. I think I've seen like an apple juice, or not apple juice, a grape juice themed idea. I don't know if I've seen a version of that. And there was someone working on a chocolate themed version of it at one point. But ship management, I think, is the first time I've heard that about viticulture. I think that one of the things, the kind of the key elements of viticulture, one of the key elements is that there's a specific order of operations to make wine, or to move through, all the way from having nothing to filling a wine order, all the different steps in between. And one of the really crucial steps in between those is the fact that your grapes and your wine tokens age on their own. They increase in value without you having to do anything. That passive aging, that passive value increasing is a really key part of the game. And I think, so if you were to apply another theme to viticulture, I think that would be something that I would have to keep. I think I would have to keep that element. I see lots of questions to the answer about which, and Missy answers. So Missy said, so these are the 5 Stonemaier games that Missy would bring to another country: Scythe, Wyrmspan, Viticulture, Apiary, and Space to Later ship Vantage. I am going to include Vantage on my list. In fact, I know for sure right now that I have Rolling Realms and Vantage on the list, just because I have played them more than any of our other games, and I don't get tired of them. Not that I get tired of our other games, but I've played the Rolling Realms and Vantage, but potentially exponentially more than the other games, even though I played our games many, many times. So yeah, I see no end in sight for me getting tired of those games, even after, I guess not hundreds of plays yet, but almost 100 plays. Probably over 100 plays of Vantage so far, but not quite of Rolling Realms. The Span, I want to bring a Span game in this hypothetical question. And it's tough for me to decide because I really like our Span games, Wingspan, Wyrmspan, and Finspan, for different reasons. That's a tough one. I like the weight of Wyrmspan. I like the hatchling mechanisms. I like how the theme is really integrated into Wyrmspan, that you're going on these little exploration adventures through the cavern. I love that. I also love the cave cards plus the dragon cards. And the hatchlings, I love the hatchlings. In Wingspan, I love that there's so much content for Wingspan available. I know fans are clamoring for the next expansion, but there's a lot of cards available for Wingspan so far and various ways to play it. And so in this hypothetical question, I'm assuming that you can take the expansions as well. And then Finspan is so smooth to play. Like it's 45 to 60 minutes once you know how to play. You can really get through a game of Finspan. It doesn't make the game better than the other games, but I'm trying to find, in this hypothetical question, I'm trying to find games that fit different categories, if that's all that I can have on my shelf. Here's David joining us. David has been doing a wonderful job with Automa Factory. I've been corresponding with David about some projects recently. Thank you, David, for all the work that you're doing with Automa, including for Tokaido. I think Morton was the lead on the Tokaido solo mode, but I'm sure, David, you were involved with that too. I see more picks for the 5 games that you would bring. I'm not going to post them all up here. I'll post one just for fun. Mark says, can I just bring them all? He says, but if I have to choose Rolling Realms, Tapestry, Apiary, Scythe, and Vantage, if I only bring one, Rolling Realms. Yeah, Mark has gone deep into Rolling Realms with some really creative ideas, including, or not even just ideas, Mark has executed on those ideas, which I really appreciate. Mark recently shared a fan-made mode for Rolling Realms to play it in like kind of a dual format. And Mark, I think he's posted this on Board Game Geek and on the Rolling Realms Facebook group, if you're curious to check that out. Okay, so this past weekend, I did a video about engine building. engine building, I did a poll last year. I think this is actually a slightly older video, but I did a poll last year to Stonemaier ambassadors about their favorite mechanisms in general, and engine building was the top pick. Let me look at that data. Yeah, so actually, no, it wasn't quite the top pick. It was the second most picked mechanism among the favorite mechanisms that ambassadors selected. Worker placement got the most votes, and then engine building got the second. Oh no, I'm missing one. It was worker placement, deck building, close second. Third was engine building. And all of those had really more than double the number of selections than all the other mechanisms, which was interesting to me. So this past week, when I posted this video about engine building, there was a lot of interest and discussion about engine building games that people like. Also did a blog post. So I mentioned in the title here, Kickstarter Trio. I think for the first time in a long time, I backed 3 Kickstarter games all in one day yesterday. All 3 for different reasons, but they all share the common reason that I believe in the creators. I think the creators are really cool people making really cool things. And let me show them to you, actually. I'll pull up my other screen so you can see what these games are. I backed all of these to get a copy of the game. Okay. I'll pull this. I want to make sure there's no spoilers on my screen over here. Okay, so here's the first one. This is the one that hasn't met the funding goal yet, but the creator is awesome. I did a blog post, an interview with Sam recently. This is Forgelings. And let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Forgelings. This one launched yesterday. I backed it. I'm excited about it. The next one is a blog post interview that I did just on Monday with Chris Porter, another awesome creator. Chris's project has funded. In fact, it's at 300% right now. This is Holiday Hills. And Chris has spent a lot of time getting this game right. He could have launched it months ago, but he has spent more and more time playtesting, honing, working on the components, getting it ready to go to print. This is Holiday Hills, so I backed this one. And then I also backed this wonderful 2-player game, Goodknack, however you want to pronounce it. This is a really clever, primarily a 2-player dueling game. There are other modes to play. I've only played 2-player. This style of game, I like to play 2-player. Really, really clever game. I did a video about this recently as well. So those are the 3 games that I backed all in one day yesterday, for potentially a record for my backing. Did any of you back anything yesterday? I think yesterday was a pretty big launch day for Kickstarter campaigns. Your inner child says, if you had Scythe always set up on my table, would you play it more? Same question for Euphoria or other Stonemaier games with moderate setup. Yeah, I guess those games do have a little bit more setup than the other games. Fortunately, I don't think any of our games really take more than around 5 minutes, maybe stretching into 10 minutes for Scythe to set up. But no, I would say setup time is not an impediment for me to get Scythe to the table. If someone ever wants to play Scythe, I'm happy to play Scythe. Absolutely. That's really the case for any of our games. Billy says, I'm looking for recommendations for games that utilize mini games well so I can try them out to add my research for an idea. Any thoughts? Much appreciated. You know, Bill, it's been a while, but I think I have done a video about mini games. Let me look it up on my YouTube channel real quick to see if I have a video about mini games. I'm going to search my channel for mini games. Yes, I do have one. It's a little older, but Billy, if you go look on the Stonemaier Games YouTube channel and you search for the word mini, you'll find a video of me. It's old enough that I'm in my old condo, so it's almost 6 years old at this point. And the mini games I discuss are in the games Mansions of Madness, Trajan, A Feast for Odin, Time Stories, The Seventh Continent, Captain Sonar, Space Cadets, some escape room games, Stardew Valley, The Rise of Queensdale, Gugong, and The Witcher 3. And even though they weren't in the video, I mentioned in the description that there's some games that I added later, including Kraken Skulls, which is actually tied to Holiday Hills, the game that I mentioned earlier in this video related to Kickstarter. Endless Winter, Spots, Honga, and Horrified. In fact, Spots, I think, is Spots is a game of mini games, essentially. Yeah, so check out that video. Search the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, for the word mini games. You'll see a bunch of suggestions, Billy. Curve Cut Games and Ideas says, I bought Euphoria at a flea market this weekend. I didn't realize the solo mode was separate. Will it be available anytime soon? So the solo mode for Euphoria it's included in the expansion. So if you buy the expansion, the solo mode is in the expansion. That is how we make it available. yeah, I'd have to go way back to remember why it didn't end up in the core game. I think largely, actually, it's because I wasn't working with Morton at that time. I was just getting to know Morton at that time. But yeah, if you buy the expansion, you'll get the solo mode in that expansion. Let's see. I see some people mentioning Formaggio, some backing of a campaign called Formaggio. Interestingly, I was confused by that for a second because we have an expansion, an out of print but yet in print through a print on demand service expansion for viticulture called Formaggio. It isn't one that I consider essential. That's why it's not in Tuscany Essential. Joshua mentioned some mini games here. Here's William popping up. He says, I don't know how you keep up with the Vantage AMA. Did you find a way to design surprises or secrets from yourself? Aside from forgetting the 1,000 cards you designed, do you know the whole planet? It's a good question, William. And yeah, it's been really fun. The Vantage AMA has continued to go on. Fewer questions now than at the beginning, but that's there was a Vantage AMA on Board Game Geek that I posted over a week ago now. But so William... So technically, somewhere in my brain is all of the information about Vantage, because I wrote almost all the text in the game. There was a little bit of assistance there, but I wrote, I don't know, 98% of the text in the game. I designed nearly every element of the game. There are a few puzzles that were designed by the Wild Optimist, but I designed pretty much everything. And you're right, there are essentially 1,700 cards worth of content in the game. 1,300 actual pieces of cardboard cards because some of them are double-sided. So I know the whole thing, but it is so much that I can't remember everything. Like I can remember, like if I play Vantage, I can remember that story. I can visualize it because I have these pictures that I walked through for days or weeks after that. But it's such a big world that months after that, or multiple plays after that, it's hard to remember exactly what is to the east of a certain location or to the west of another location. Oftentimes I have a general idea, a pretty good idea. I have a great knowledge base of the world, and so that's something I'm hoping players will learn as they play, that there's a lot of information to learn about the world. But no, I wasn't able to design surprises or secrets specifically, but because of my limited memory capacity, I feel like I'm still exploring and discovering whenever I play Vantage. I had something else to say about that. Oh, yeah. We have a Vantage update coming next Thursday, and it's a fun one. I'm excited to share that one with you. Nicole says, I'm trying to cut down on new Kickstarter titles. Yeah, I've definitely seen my backings decrease, Nicole. I've become a lot more selective, oftentimes waiting for retail, which I know isn't always helpful for creators, but I have a lot of games to play, or at least access to a lot of games to play. But so I'm becoming very selective, but that's why yesterday stood out a little bit with me backing 3 different games. Tim says, we enjoyed a game of Emerald Skulls lately. Hope you're doing well. Tim, that is one that I'm hoping to get to the table. I got my copy just the other day, so I'm excited to play it. I'm glad you mentioned that. Jeff mentioned a good one here. Yeah, Jeff, I'm going to add this one. The game Las Vegas Royale, which I played with Jeff at Geekway last year, has some great mini games in it. A great pick there. Your Trout has lots of questions about Scythe today. Even though Scythe is done, do you get it out to try fan-made campaigns or scenarios released on BGG, or is that more Alan's domain? Definitely not Alan's domain. Alan's domain is healthcare and game submissions. But no, I haven't played any fan-made stuff for Scythe other than what Kai created for the Wind Gambit, which became official content. And Ryan, I would say, is a fan of Scythe. He and I worked together on the Rise of Fenris. But since we've completed Scythe, I haven't played fan-made content for it. Manly Astronaut says, no backing yesterday. I'm always scared to get tricked since you're basically pre-ordering something. There's a lot to that statement to unpack. I appreciate that you have feelings about Kickstarter and crowdfunding. I would say in many cases, so pre-order, I don't know. I won't go into the whole thing. I don't think it's the same as pre-ordering. I think you're helping to create something. But there is a risk because you are essentially giving someone money far in advance of when you'll actually receive the thing. But so the question is, by the way, how do you choose which Kickstarter game to back to minimize risks? A big part of it, as I mentioned, is that I trust the creator. If I know something about the creator, I know what they created in the past, maybe I've heard them on podcasts, maybe I've talked to them directly, that is a big part of it. But I also look, I look at the project page. I can generally tell pretty well by what a project page, how a project page is constructed to determine if I can trust that they are going to follow through on the campaign. And a big part of this is looking at the project page to see how far along the game is. If it looks like the game still needs a lot of work, that adds a lot of uncertainty to my decision to actually back the campaign. So, however, there are certain creators that I believe in so much that I don't really care how long it takes for them to get it right. But in general, I prefer for creators to have the game as close as possible to being finished, at least in terms of the design, when they actually launch the Kickstarter campaign. Yeah, Vantage has 1,300 pieces of paper that are defined as cards. So 1,300 cards. It's a total of 1,700 cards worth of content because all the 800 locations are double-sided. They're on both sides of the cards. Originally, I was hoping to have separate cards for each of them, but it kind of becomes a little bit redundant to have these giant cards with essentially a blank back on them when you could use both sides to cut down on the space needed, the weight of the game, like physical weight, and the cost of the game. The cost would have gone up, and also the price would have gone up considerably. Chat says, is the Vantage planet somewhere you would like to vacation if you had a happy landing? I would absolutely love to vacation, or at least visit the Vantage planet. I get that. That's why I love crashing on the Vantage planet when I play the game. Oh, Nick mentions a game-related campaign here. Nick is backing Becca Scott's Good Society, making series produce live and put high quality production into playthroughs of a game. Yeah. Oh no, at the game. I don't know. The recent a little content right already that I was retired week. What else is going on today? I mean, in a that, but I think included and good and trade. Can you all see me again? Our internet seems to be working fine. Yeah, let me know if you can see and hear me again. I seemed to I left for a second and then it came back. Sorry about that. Yeah. I can't tell if that was from my end or from StreamYard's end. Anyway, sorry about that. What was I talking about? I was talking about, the Traitors. How the Traitors US finale last week. I did a video about the Traitors, about the game design of the Traitors. I've been doing that for a few reality shows. And yeah, that was fun to do. I like doing those videos. So you can check that out last week if you're curious about the game design of videos. Let's see, of game design of reality competition shows specifically. So Michael has a question or a concern here, not a question, but Michael is concerned about the tariffs on games that enter the US and then cross over into Canada. Michael, I agree that's a concern. I would also say that a lot of companies now just ship directly from China to Canada. So they aren't, that doesn't impact tariffs because the games are never entering the US. But I do agree that tariffs are they're wild. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's not a good decision for U.S. companies that are paying these taxes on imported goods and how it's going to impact consumer costs and consumer spending in the U.S. It's going to have a really bad impact on it, and is already having a bad impact on it. Anthony says, I'm going to a local game convention this weekend. I have booked a 3-hour slot to playtest some of my game designs. This is my first time playtesting with local gamers. Do you have any advice? Well, Anthony, I would first applaud your courage for doing that. I think that's awesome that you're putting your game out there for strangers to playtest with you. I would recommend, so a few things. I would recommend having the game set up in advance. I would recommend, since it is a local playtest, not obviously. I think sometimes playtesters think, okay, I'm going to hand the rules over to the people to learn the rules and play in front of me. Don't do that to playtesters who are signing up. In this case, you are the teacher for the game, guide them through the game, and ideally help them get into turns as quickly as possible. So don't do a 20-minute teach, do a 2-minute teach, and then help them start taking turns of the game until they feel comfortable taking those turns themselves. That's my recommendation. Also, I would preface the playtest by letting people know what you were trying to play test. It might be possible. It might be that you were just wanting to watch people play the game or play the game with them if you're going to participate to see how human beings interact with your game. That's fine. You can also say, this is where the game is right now. I am looking for these specific things. I'm looking for someone to push this one thing, push this boundary. I'm looking for you to try to break the game. You could ask for things like that as well. I would say those are the main things. Also, I would say to tell the playtesters that they're going to play for a certain amount of time. And so that way they can kind of plan ahead and be like, okay, I know I'm going to be at this table, whether or not I like the game for the next 45 minutes or maybe an hour, whatever the time it is that you want to be, because probably you're going to want to get in multiple plays of the game with different playtesters. So let them know that time frame in advance. We're going to play for this much time, and then we're going to stop and we're going to talk about the game for 5 minutes after that. I think that I don't know. I think all those things might be helpful for your game, and I hope it goes well. Your inner child says, I've got a friend in Kenya. What would it take for him to distribute Stonemaier Games from Africa? So we do have some distributors, one specific distributor that I'm aware of in Africa. And so probably your friend, if your friend is a retailer, then your friend could buy from this distributor that we have in Africa. And if your friend is a consumer, then they should talk to their local stores about buying a game from a distributor. Yeah. What else is going on? I mentioned a podcast in this in the title for this video, and I wanted to mention it won't be live this week, but I've started recording an experimental podcast with my friend Mitchell, where every week we're showing up. We're recording on Fridays currently to give this a try, where we show up with one thing that we are excited about, one thing related to the tabletop games that we are excited about. And we talk about that for about 10 minutes, and then it switches to the other person. That person talks about the thing that they're excited about. Neither of us know the topic that the other is bringing to the table. It's just us talking about it for a little while. We're going to try this out for a little bit. I'm going to see how it goes. I will put the video version on our YouTube channel, the Stonemaier Games YouTube channel, and Mitchell is going to host it as an audio podcast on his own website and elsewhere. So it will be available if you like. It won't be a visual thing, but if you want to watch our faces talk or if you just want to subscribe to YouTube, you'll be able to get it there. But I am curious, once they start going live, and there won't be one this week or next week, so I'm letting you know a little bit in advance. But once they start going live, I'd love to hear your feedback on it. If you like the format, if you'd like us to be more specific, I don't know. Anything goes for how this podcast evolves, but I'd love to get your feedback once you see it. And if you have any feedback in general about podcasts, especially 30-minute podcasts, what are your favorite things about some of your 30-minute podcasts? And I'm thinking about this partially in terms of the focus. Like oftentimes when I listen to a podcast, I really like when they focus on one or two specific topics. I generally gravitate away from podcasts where they're covering like a lot of information about a variety of games. There are exceptions to that, including the Secret Cabal. I love the Secret Cabal gaming podcast, and I love the beginning of it where they talk about a bunch of different games. But yeah, I'm curious if you have any feedback about 30-minute podcasts that you love and what makes you love those types of podcasts. Julio says that he got to play Wyrmspan and Scythe this past week, a Stonemaier week. Forgot how much I love Scythe's depth and table presence. No, we're good. Yeah. And Julio says Wyrmspan is a great game, easy to learn, and a lot to see. I'm glad you had those positive experiences with those games, Julio. And yeah, good reminder that I need to get Scythe back to the table. So here's a good comment about playtesting from Curve Cut Games. His advice is I'd say let the playtesters finish their comments, even if it's something you've already addressed in previous iterations. I think that's a great advice. Oftentimes, and I do this myself, when a playtester says starts to comment on some aspect of the game, and as a designer, you might chime in and say, "Oh no, I tried that before, it didn't work." I think that's okay for you to think. It's even okay for you to say, but I like this advice here of letting them finish their comment because it's still worth hearing, especially if they're still commenting on it for the current version of the game. And also along those lines, I would help to guide playtesters a little bit because I think the instinct of playtesters is often to try to solve the problem, to try to fix the problem, to offer ideas of if there's a perceived problem, they want to offer their solution for it. But the really key thing for playtesters is to share what happened and how it made them feel. So if they have a specific example of something that happened in the game that didn't resonate with them or really did resonate with them. And so you oftentimes as a designer have to steer them away from providing the solution and get to the heart of the problem, what happened, how it made them feel. I think that is part of the job of a designer in a local playtest when that's happening. One other thing about that too, I've noticed at Design Day that oftentimes the playtest itself can be put on pause a number of times as playtesters comment on it during the game. And I think there's a nice balance to be found there where you don't want playtesters to forget their comments during the game. But you also don't want to completely pause the flow of the game to have a big discussion during the game itself about something that's happening or not happening. And so I'd recommend taking notes, like always have a notepad available to take notes while you're playtesting. And if someone has a comment, say, okay, I'm making a note of it. We'll come back to it at the end of the playtest to get there. Also, though, don't be afraid to change things on the fly. If something really, really isn't working, you can change it on the fly during a playtest. Great question. Got me thinking a lot about things to do while playtesting. Anthony says, any thoughts on Rodney's board game survey? I may have missed that. Was there a Watch It Played video recently? I'll pull it up. So Watch It Played survey. Yeah, Anthony, let me know some context on this. I'm assuming you're meaning Rodney from Watch It Played. Let's see what he's talked about recently on his channel. Does he have it? Take our survey. Okay, there we go. That seems pretty video on the Watch It Played YouTube channel that says take our board game survey. So I will check that out. Yeah, thank you, Anthony, for letting me know. I don't know how I missed that. Mark says, do you have a gaming table at your house that you play on? I do have a gaming table. Yeah, a long time ago, I got a gaming table from what was called board gaming tables. I think it's boardgametables.com. They've changed their name to All Play because they become even more a board game company at this point. But yeah, I have a table, has a 3-piece table topper that we often have a campaign game under the topper. Right now we have Clank Legacy under the topper. Chad says, do you like short printout surveys to give to playtesters? I found they were great to get honest comments from people because they don't have to say it face to face. Chad, I think that's a great feedback for Anthony as well, to have a few specific questions that you give them afterwards. And you can even say, okay, you can fill this out right now on the spot if you want, or you can take this home. You can put like an email address or a Google Forms link, something like that on the form in case they want to think about it and process their thoughts. And so that's line too. Yeah, I really like that. That's a great idea. We've seen that work really well at Design Day. Other topics today. Things we've watched recently. Currently, our lunch show is Mythic Quest on Apple TV, and we just finished Silo Season 2 on Apple TV, and we watched 2 episodes of Severance Season 2 yesterday. We're up through episode 7 currently of Season 2 of Severance, and really enjoying it. We are also, what was the other thing we were watching? Oh, we watched a movie called Emily the Criminal, which was pretty good movie from April Ludgate. If you watch Parks and Rec, her, not her character, but the actress who plays her is Emily the Criminal in this movie. Another question of the day here. We're about halfway through. Here's my other question of the day. I actually have two questions of the day. One is I want to do a video about games where 95% of the rules of the games are on the cards themselves. So primarily what you're doing in the game is playing a card and doing the thing it says on the card. And that is most of what you need to know about the game. It's okay if there are some other rules, but that's most of the game. Some examples of this are Concordia, Inish, and Exploding Kittens. In all of those games, on your turn, you're primarily playing one card. You're doing what that card says, and that's the game. Maybe a little bit more. But I think this is a neat category of games because the accessibility levels of them are very high because you don't have to explain a lot in the game. You can just say, okay, choose one of your cards, do the thing on that card, and you'll see how it works. Arc Nova is another example of this, probably the heaviest example of this, where most of the rules of Arc Nova are right there on the cards. Actually, I don't want to say most of the rules, but a lot of them are right there on the cards. But yeah, do you have any examples of games like this where most of what you're doing is playing a single card on your turn and the rules of how you operate are right there on the card? In fact, I'm tempted to include Red Rising on this list because Red Rising comes pretty darn close to like you just do what the card says. But there is a little bit more that happens off the card as well because you're picking up a card from a location and gaining that location benefit. Jeff says, great season of Survivor so far. We're through 2 episodes, I think, of Survivor so far. Is this also the year you go back to Amazing Race? There's a St. Louis dad and son team. Oh, that's exciting. You know, I haven't thought about going back to Amazing Race, but it might be fun to do a season of that, especially since I'm doing these videos about reality competition shows now. So I've only watched maybe 1 or 2 seasons of it, but it's kind of neat. There's a St. Louis family on this season, so maybe I will go back and watch it or start watching it again. Zach mentions the Silo books. I think the Wool series, right? Wool. I've read at least one of them, maybe a couple of them in the Wool series. But Zach, I do appreciate the reminder and the recommendation. Nicole, thank you, Nicole, for asking about the chocolate of the day. You know, I'm eating some Girl Scout cookies right now, so I think my chocolate of the day will be some Samoas after lunch today. Some suggestions so far for my question have been Red 7, Flux, and Everdell. I'm trying to think if Everdell qualifies for that. For Everdell, it's close because in Everdell you're oftentimes activating cards, but there's a big worker placement part of the game too that does not involve just playing the cards. So I don't know if that quite count. I think Flux and Red 7 are definitely in that category. I'm going to make a note of them here. It's been a while since I played either of those games. Red 7. Flux. And Smitten, Mark does mention, yes, and Smitten, you're absolutely right, Mark. Smitten does qualify for this category. Appreciate that reminder. It's right there behind me. Yeah. Chad mentions Marvel United. Been a little while since I played that one too, but I can see that applying. Marvel United. Within the superhero world, Sentinels of the Multiverse largely does this as well. Austin is recommending the show Extracted, similar to Survivor, but competitors are at the mercy of their family members to exit the game and forfeit the prize. You know, Austin, I need to add that to my list. I think I forgot to actually write it down last time, but I had another friend recommend Extracted as well. So I'll put that on my list. Thank you, Austin, for the reminder. Jeremy mentions Guillotine. I don't think I've actually played Guillotine. I'll have to look into how that one works. Julio also mentions Flux. Mentions Terraforming Mars as well, which I played very recently. And I wouldn't say it qualifies. I see what you're saying, where it's a decent percentage, but I was actually reminded while playing Terraforming Mars just how many actions are not on the cards. There's quite a bit that you're doing that you can do that isn't on the cards themselves. But I see where you're coming from. Wingspan, would I count Wingspan? No, because in most there are turns in Wingspan where you are playing cards, but that is its own action. Like play a card is an action, while there are 3 other completely different actions that are not related to actually playing a card. Valerie, I would say that love letter counts for this. You all are good at this. I'm very impressed they're coming up with these on the spot. It's tough for these categories sometimes where there isn't a category on Board Game Geek to search for. I can search for worker placement, but I can't search for a category like this. So I appreciate your examples. Ray mentions marrying Mr. Darcy. He says there is an exception to it, but for the most part, you are just playing a card. I'm not familiar with that game, but I will add it to the list. Marrying Mr. Darcy. Yeah, thank you for that. If you're missed out on the question is, what are games where primarily, like 90% of the game, 90% of the rules of the game, have you simply playing a card on your turn and doing what that card says? Written out, spelled out on the card, you just do the thing that card says. Ian asked about the show Mythic Quest. Mythic Quest is a show on Apple TV. It's a half-hour, mostly comedy, but there's some drama to it, about a video game company, kind of an over-the-top video game company. And it stars one of the people who are behind It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's not exactly that type of humor, but there's a little bit of that humor in the show. William says that his wife has a podcast called Tell Your Friends. What I like about her podcast is that she and her host edits and refines the episode before releasing it so it can sound crisp and focused. That's good to know, William. That probably won't be part of the video version of the show, but the audio version of our podcast, I think, will be a little bit more edited. I'm looking through comments here. Sushi Go. So the Sushi Go qualify for this category. It's an easy game that tells you what you need to do. That's an interesting one, Anthony, because you're right. Most of the things that you need to know about Sushi Go are right there on the cards. But I wouldn't say it falls into the category of play a card, do what that card says, because most of the cards aren't actions. It's set collection. The action itself is just putting the card into play or selecting the card. I like where you're going with that, but I would say it's a little bit different than this category of play a card. Play a card, do what that card says. I'll make a note of that. What it says. Yeah. Nicole mentions Castle Combo. On your turn in Castle Combo, you are indeed playing a card and doing what it says. Part of it is about selecting the card, but yeah, I think that would apply to it. Yeah. It's an odd category. And I know I'm making it more specific as I even talk about it here live. Peacemaker's Horrors of War has only card actions. Okay. I have not played that one. So the category is games where primarily what you're doing is playing a card. So on your turn, you are playing one card and doing what that card says. And where most of the rules of the game are on that card. So the thing that most of what you need to know is on the card itself. There could be other rules to the game, but most of them are on the card. Which makes me wonder if Dune Imperium should qualify. Because in Dune Imperium, you are just choosing a card from your hand, one card on most turns, and playing that card and doing what that card says. But there's so much else going on in the game, but that also applies to Arc Nova. So I'll make a note of it. I don't know if I'll quite count Dune Imperium, but it comes close. For deck building, I wouldn't say deck building. Most deck building games don't do this check, because most deck building games, you're playing a bunch of cards, not just one card. But I do agree it is adjacent to that category. And there are deck building games like Dune Imperium where you are only playing one card. Board Game Eric mentions the Veil of Eternity. Play a card, do the action. I would say it comes close. There are other phases to Veil of Eternity and other choices that you can make, but I would say it's right in there. It's close to it. Pete mentions Force Shuffle. Yeah, so this is where it gets a little where do I draw the line? Because in Force Shuffle, there is a whole turn that you can take that does not involve playing cards. It involves drawing cards. But for the most part, you're right. In Force Shuffle, you are simply playing a card and doing what that card says. I'll make a note of it, of that in Veil of Eternity. I'll have to decide where to draw the line for this arbitrary line that I'm drawing for this video. Force Shuffle, Veil of Eternity. I'll keep an eye on the other suggestions, but just to move along to one other topic, let's see. The other question I had for today, actually, no, a few other quick topics. Again, next week is the Tokaido reveal, the Stonemaier Games version of Tokaido reveal. In fact, I can show you the box right now. Here's what the Stonemaier Games version of Tokaido looks like. But next week will be the reveal of it, and then we'll do our launch of the product a few weeks later. What was I going to say? Yesterday, I had an interesting chat with a company called the Op Games. Pretty big company. There are a lot of people on this call. They do this thing where they invite people in the industry, I guess, to join them for a weekly call where anyone at the company can join the call and kind of listen in to a person either give a talk or answer questions. And it was kind of neat. I asked them if they could record it so other people could hear the conversation. I was pretty candid in the conversation because I felt like I was talking to a few people, but really, if it'll be broadcast at a certain point. So I'll share that once they share the recording of that video. But that was interesting. I haven't done anything like that for a while, where I'm facing a lot of different people on the screen. I know it's similar here, but I was actually seeing their faces, which adds a slightly different effect. And talking to a bunch of people, some of whom were asking questions, others were just listening and participating. So that was neat to do that with the Op recently. Yeah, I've been playing Clank Legacy 2 recently. And honestly, yeah, I'll say this here a little candidly. I've been struggling a little bit with Clank Legacy 2. I really love the first Clank Legacy. And it seems like for the second version, they leaned heavily into the amount of stuff that you get to unlock in the game. And so almost, I would say 80% of our time in the game, maybe that's extreme, but it feels like that, is spent on unlocking stuff. Like whenever you unlock something, you get this long checklist of things to do, stickers to find, punchboard stuff, cards to reveal, flavor text to read. Like it feels like a job that the table has whenever we unlock something, and it really pauses the flow of the game. And there are times in the game where I'll go, if you take a turn that doesn't involve unlocking stuff, it can go very quickly. And then it might be, for a four-player game, it might be 20 or 30 minutes before you get a turn again, because if those turns are involved in unlocking things. So I find it interesting because it seems to me that the designers of Clank Legacy 2 really focused on that idea of it being a game of opening up stuff and unlocking stuff. But I don't know if that has enhanced the experience itself over the original Clank Legacy, which was a lot more streamlined when you unlock stuff, or at least I remember that way. I remember it being a little more streamlined. We often played 2 games of Clank Legacy back to back in about 3.5 hours originally. And now the games of Clank Legacy at the same player count, four players, Clank Legacy 2, are taking 3.5 hours to play a single game, which has been a little surprising to me. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through questions, looking about comments here. Does Seven Wonders qualify for this category of on your turn, all you do is play a card and do what that card says? It comes close. It's right on the edge. I mean, there is the drafting element of the game, but you are choosing the card from your hand and putting it into play. I would say it is close to what I said about Sushi Go, where it is oftentimes about set collection, where the card itself isn't an action. The card itself is something that you're simply putting into play. Like when you play a resource card in Seven Wonders, you are not doing a resource action. You are adding a resource to your tableau. So I put that a little bit differently. I think that maybe one of the key differentiators here is that the card spells out exactly what you are doing on the card itself. So you don't need a lot of other context to take a turn in the game. You can play a card and just read and say, okay, this is what I'm doing because this card tells me exactly what I'm doing in this card. Mark says, do social deduction games count? Like in Blood in the Clock Tower, your rolls tell you what your abilities are. And it kind of does. I mean, but in this specific category, I'm saying you are playing a card and doing what that card says. The action that you're taking on your turn is doing exactly what the text on the card says to do, and you're playing a single card. Chad just mentioned Marvel Champions. You have to pay for the card with other cards, but you still do one card's action. Okay, that's good to know, Chad. It's been a while since I played that. Marvel Champions, you're playing one card on your turn. Marvel Champions. I need to try that one again. Let me get that back to the table. Quest for El Dorado. So deck builders, any deck builder where you're playing multiple cards would not qualify for this category. Jason says, how are you liking Tidal Blades 2? So far, I've only played the one game of Tidal Blades 2. And I thought it was a really impressive design in terms of product design and in-game design when I played that one game. Have you watched Resident Alien with Alan Tudyk? Have you seen that his co-star from Firefly is joining him for season 4? I didn't know about that, no, but I have watched all the seasons that I think are available for Resident Alien. I feel like we've watched 2 seasons, not 3, though, so maybe we missed a season. We'll have to check that out. But yeah, Megan and I have watched the Resident Alien. Great show. Chad says, do you have an all-time favorite movie? If it's ever on TV, no matter what is in the movie, will you stop what you're doing and watch? We only have streaming services, so we don't have any actual live TV now to flip through. I have a few movies that I will almost always watch if they're on. One of them that always comes to mind is the movie The Incredibles, the Pixar movie. I love The Incredibles, and I have a hard time not watching it if I watch even just a little bit of The Incredibles. Flo mentions Love Letter or For Sale. Play a card, do what the card says. Love Letter, definitely. For Sale, I would say the rules of the game are beyond what's written on the cards themselves, though. Yeah. This isn't a knock on games that do this differently. This is just for this specific category, though. Courtesans, Airland and Sea. I'm seeing some suggestions here. Airland and Sea. It's pretty close. I could see that. Yeah, I'll go back through the comments after this video to add others to the list. I appreciate you all thinking of these ideas. Also, Ian mentioned Star Wars Unlimited. You play multiple cards per phase, but only one card per turn. I can see that. I can see that. Star Wars Unlimited. Wars Unlimited. I haven't played Courtesans. What was the other suggestion I saw? Airland. I'll have to go refresh myself on Airland and Sea to see if it qualifies for this. Again, completely arbitrary list that I'm thinking. Spaceman says, by play a card, you mean cards from your hand? Or do you mean action cards like those in Ark Nova and Civilization? Ark Nova would count, and Civilization New Dawn would count. So yeah, they don't necessarily have to be in your hand, but you do have to play a single card from somewhere. It could even be from outside of your control if you're choosing a card from a shared tableau. But I think the key is really just that the description on the card spells out the action that you're taking. It says this is what you're doing, and that there's only one of them per turn. Yeah. Hilda mentions Traveling Fair. I haven't played that one. So Hilda, I guess there are 2 questions so far in today's livecast. I started off with a question of if you could only take 1 or 5 Stonemaier games to a new country that you're moving to, and you had to leave all your other games behind, what games would you choose? The other question is, if you're playing a game where in the game, on your turn, all you do is play one card, and the action that you're doing on that turn is fully spelled out on that card, such that 90% of the rules in the game are on the cards in your hand or in your tableau, wherever they are. That's the type of games that I'm looking for this category. The other question I had for today, I know we have a few minutes left, a blog post that I want to do soon, is I've been listening to a lot of videos about YouTube channels and how to make more effective YouTube videos, things like that. And Mr. Beast's YouTube channel inevitably comes up because it's one of the biggest in the world. And I learned something about his, Mr. Beast has this idea of extreme ownership that he tries to impart onto his employees, his coworkers. This idea of extreme ownership. And I have some text that I can share about it in the blog post, but the idea is that for everything that you do at your job, that you take extreme ownership over it. You don't pass the buck to anyone else. Not saying that you can't delegate anything else, but that you say, I have accepted this responsibility, and I take extreme ownership over making it as awesome as possible for our viewers, our customers, our clients, whoever it may be. And I think that's a really neat concept. the idea of extreme ownership, of not, because there's so many times, and I've done this myself, where it feels like something is out of your control, and you let that become a reason for something not being as great as it could be, instead of taking more control than you expected, than you thought that you could take control over. I think there are kind of dangerous, not dangerous, but side effects of this that can lead to, like, the unfortunate side effects of perfectionism, or not delegating when you could delegate something that could be done well. But the idea of extreme ownership, I'm just curious if you've heard of that concept, and if you have any thoughts on that you think I should bring up in the blog post when I write about it. Libertalia, does Libertalia count as a game where you're simply playing a single card on your turn and doing what that card says? It's pretty close. It's right up there. It might be one of the reasons that I really like Libertalia. There are a little bit more beyond that of what you're doing in a turn of Libertalia, but essentially, I think it's probably close enough to include, especially since it is just a single card, and the text that you're just following the text on the card itself. Coffee of the day question. My coffee of the day is a mix between a coffee that we made in our French press here, that I can't remember which brand it is, honestly, and so it's black coffee, but I also added a little bit of Vietnamese coffee to make it, I don't know, taste a little bit more interesting. So I really, really like Vietnamese coffee. Ian says this way, says, if your name is over the door, you better take full responsibility for everything. And Ian, I agree with that. Like, when anything at Stonemaier Games goes wrong, I feel responsibility, and I try to take responsibility. But I would say it goes beyond having your name on a door. It's just, if my job is project management, I take full responsibility over every aspect of project management, even though certain elements of it may feel like they're out of my control. If they do, and something is going wrong, I need to take extreme ownership over that. I think that's the concept that I'm talking about here. Krista mentioned sea salt and paper. I think it would count on that. And sea salt and paper, I think on most of your turns, you are simply playing a card. So I think that qualifies. I need to play that again, though, to make sure. Sea, salt, and paper. Love the art in that game. Nelson says, my boss talks about ownership when we make a mistake. Taking ownership instead of blaming others refuses the situation and makes things easier to deal with. Well said, Nelson. I completely agree with that. Yeah, it's when... So I don't want to. So we all mess up, we all make mistakes. I do. My coworkers will make mistakes, and it increases my respect and appreciation for a coworker when something goes wrong, that they were taking responsibility for, and when they say, "Oh, this didn't go the way that I hoped it would go," and I take ownership over that, like that to me, I really, really appreciate that. I think a big part of it is because it speaks to me that it says to me that they are going to find ways to do better in the future with that. Whereas if you can't even admit that something didn't go as well as you hoped, I don't. It's where do you go from there? Where do you go from that point? So that's something I try to very much try to do myself, to admit when something goes wrong, when we make a mistake, when I make a mistake, when I fall short in my responsibilities. I think the first step is admitting that it didn't go as well as I hoped, and that's okay. Like, it's okay for something to not go poorly. And actually, Mr. Beast talks about this in his extreme ownership manual. It's a very short manual where he says it's okay if things don't go as well as you hope they would go. So things are never going to be, or things are not going to go perfectly at times. And part of the process is starting from that and admitting that, or not admitting it, but coming to terms with that and saying it and sharing that, and then taking ownership over making it better next time. Jeremy says, in the mining industry, we use the term see it, own it, solve it. I really like that. Oh, in terms of safety, especially. Yeah. See it, own it, solve it. I really like that. I'm going to write that down next to the post, actually. See it, own it. See it, own it, solve it. Yeah, it's like if you walk down the street and you see a piece of trash on the street, do you pick it up trash shouldn't be on the street, right? Is it your responsibility? Not necessarily, but you could take ownership over that street or that sidewalk, especially if it's your own street or sidewalk, and pick up that piece of trash. Chad says, I think the concept of extreme ownership would have to be adopted by the top dog of a company if they like going to one person, the manager, to get answers and to give out discipline. That's interesting, Chad. I hadn't thought about this in terms of like discipline or even almost accountability. It's more that about bringing in the types of people who want to take extreme ownership over their responsibilities. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it. I'm not thinking about it in terms of discipline, honestly. I don't like to think about my coworkers that way. Anthony says, as a leader, you need to delegate tasks, and the ownership for mistakes are on both the individual, but also as a leader to both highlight and support how to correct the mistake. Yeah, I think there's good conversations to be had here if someone is willing to have those conversations. Ian says that applies to anyone in any position. If it's your error, it's your error. Yeah. Chad says, I was a manager, and while I was on vacation, my assistant manager messed up big time, but he got all the blame and the shouts. He got plus docked pay to make up for the mistake. It's a touchy subject. Yeah, I can see that, Chad. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, that if you are away from your job and you hope that, and you prepare someone else to do your job while you are not able to do it, and they have a big mistake, where does that accountability fall? That's a tough one. I can see how that's a touchy subject. Okay, sea salt and paper doesn't have any text on the cards. I think it's okay. So for this category that I mentioned, I think in general, I am looking for cards that have text on them that just spell out the rules, because that way all you have to look at is the card themselves. A great example of this is Concordia. Concordia says in text what you're doing. It doesn't explain the full rules for everything that you're doing, but it comes pretty close in the text. I think I'll have to decide in the video if I'm going to draw a line between text or no text, because there are certain games that can explain a lot in an icon, but I greatly appreciate when it's also spelled out in text. So I don't know exactly where I'll draw the line in the video itself. Curve Cut mentions that he'll be playtesting at Terminal City Tabletop Convention in Vancouver. Feel free to say hi if you run into Curve Cut here. Yako Willink has 2 books that are great. One being Extreme Ownership and the other being The Dichotomy of Leadership. Oh, cool. Maybe that's where Mr. Beast got that concept of extreme ownership. Thanks for that recommendation. Garrett's popping in right at the end to say hi. Thanks, Garrett, for popping in to say hi. And we are right at the end here. Yeah. Thank you all for your suggestions for this topic of a video that I'll be making soon, and your comments about extreme ownership and anything else that we talked about today. It was fun to hang out with you. I hope you have a great week. Hope the weather is nice where you are, and I will see you next Wednesday for our Tokaido reveal day. See you then. Bye.